Hey everyone, this is Gleb Bakhmutov, and today I'll show an advanced trick for overwriting the location object and detecting when the application assigns something to the href property and navigates. And we're gonna stop it so that we don't navigate, we just get the URL. This is useful in a situation where you go from one domain to another. Let's say you do your testing and then all of a sudden the application wants to redirect to third-party domain. And I don't want to get into the discussion of Cypress and how its multi-origin is complicated. In my cases, I test 99% on my side, and if I need to validate something on external side, the complication is not worth switching to another test run. But in this case, I'm going to show you a technique that allows you to um, stub this particular assignment. This is our page. It's very simple. Hello world. Then we load the script. The app script waits 1 second and then redirects. This is equivalent to maybe a button click handler that redirects or something else. We want to prevent that. And this is our initial spec. We're going to visit the index.html. We're going to check if it shows hello world. And we need to prevent the application from navigating to the different location href. I'm going to open Cypress, end-to-end testing, spec, and right now it redirects, right? And unfortunately, because it's a different origin, Cypress is not prepared for that, so it cannot see anything. We want to avoid going to that page. If I check object get on property descriptor, let's say location href, maybe I can override it and provide my own setter function. It's impossible because this property is not configurable. For security purposes, browsers limit overriding location and href inside the location. Okay, but we can do something else. So there is this syntax in JavaScript that's called with, an expression, let's say. And what it allows you to do, it allows you to override how identifiers are looked up in the current scope. So if I use a variable x, let's say right here, well, JavaScript engine tries to look it up. Maybe it was declared. If I use something like location, well, I didn't define location, but it's available. The way JavaScript in a browser works, if you use a variable that's not defined locally, then it assumes it's a property of a window object, let's say window location, okay? And this is the same as location. If we use with syntax, right, and we use some variable, say foo, inside that block, what JavaScript will do, it will look for foo and it will look inside X, and if it cannot find foo inside X, then it will go into a window object. All right, so here's what we can do in our case. We know that the app.js has location, okay, this variable location, and we want to fake that location object by wrapping this whole script into something like with, fake, let's say window, okay? And let's say const fake window, and it has location and href, let's say an empty string, right? If we can do that, colon, okay. If we can do this, then when JavaScript executes, tries to look up location, goes to fake window, says, do you have property location? And you do have it. And this works, and it's better than location, href, because browser will not allow you to override location variable like this. Okay, so how can we wrap JavaScript code with our own code that looks like this, right? Well, we can set up a sci intercept. So when we're getting app.js, we can say request. We can go to the real server. We can get the response. Let me just make sure everything is correct. Okay. and then we can say response, this is response from the server, response body equals, and then we can say, let's say console log, and then we can put the actual response body. Okay, so let's see if this works. I have a couple of missing brackets, I want to say. Okay, I'm gonna give it an alias, and I'm gonna wait for that alias to make sure we are matching it correctly. Move it to the side. Okay, notice that we hit the intercept, and let's see if this worked. Notice intercepted app.js. So basically when the app was loading app.js, we inserted our own JavaScript inside. So now we can insert the actual wrapper. So I'll say right here, I'll say fake window location, and I don't need this. And I'll say with fake window. So we're gonna wrap the code the application sees with fake window. So let's see how this goes. Notice it no longer redirects to Acme. And now the problem is we cannot confirm the change location. So the way we can do this is by saying the real window, fake window, and we'll just point it right here. What this allows us to do is once the application executes, we can get that window object of the application, and we say should have property fake window, and we'll say its location should have property href, and we know the value, so we'll say acme.com. All right, so this syntax allows us to access that object later using setWindow command. And so when we run, notice initially it's empty, and after 1 second the app does set the href property, and we validate that. There is one other thing that you will see if you close the DevTools. Notice right now the DevTools have a disable cache checkbox. If I close the DevTools, then my JavaScript is cached. Notice 3 or 4. It doesn't really get the JavaScript from the server anymore. It gets the 3 or 4 response saying you have the latest JavaScript code. If we don't get the JavaScript, we cannot wrap it correctly because we don't get the actual JavaScript. The browser only sees the previously cached copy. If we look at the network request for JavaScript, notice the request, right, has a couple of headers. Let's say I'm gonna remove disable cache so we get the actual request headers. If modify scenes, if none match. So this is what the browser sends to the server, so the server can tell it 3 or 4, meaning cached copy, or 200 and send the real thing. So we need to remove those request headers. And if you care about network testing, I have a whole course about it. But right here, when we send the request to the server, we'll say if none match and if modified since. So we're gonna delete those 2 headers. Now we can close DevTools, and every time we load the page, the server will send the actual JavaScript. One last thing. If you don't know the expected value of href and all you want to do is check if it's a valid URL, if the server responds with a page, instead of using the value, you can say should have property href, which yields the actual value, and initially it's empty, so I'll say should not be empty. And once we get the value, right, notice, once it passes, then we can grab that URL value and just use side request, and side request will automatically fail if that server is not responding. So let's validate this. So let's say I'll put it some invalid URL, and I run the test again. Notice we do get the href, we validate or try to request it, and we get an error and the test fails. And if we fix it and run the test again, then we get that href, we ping it, the server responds with 200, everything is good. So I wrote a blog post about this example. I'm gonna link it in the description of this video. Cheers.